excited. Here today in the very first ever Loved and Found interview, I have the fabulous Autumn Miles. Not only is she beautiful and incredible, but she's a fantastic preacher. She's a host podcast. She's a host to a radio show. She has her own ministry, full-time mom. She like travels and preaches. She can do it all. And I don't know how because I still don't have kids and I'm struggling with some of this, but I'm telling you, she's doing such a phenomenal job. Not only that, but she's an author of two of my very favorite books that I read last year. So we're going to be sharing a little bit about that. But Autumn, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to have you.
Oh, thank you. I'm excited. I am so vibing with your energy. I love it. I love it. It's going to be good.
So Autumn, we met about a year ago. You came actually to the church where I'm working at currently to preach, and you preached the house down. So I know a little bit about your testimony, but do you want to just let the viewers know a little bit about how you met Jesus, a little bit about your story?
Absolutely. I grew up in a Christian home. My dad was a preacher and is still a preacher to this day. I often tell people I was born in the crib at the nursery in our church. I've just always been like, I'm a church girl for life. I love church. I've always been in church. And growing up, I was very vocal and learned at a very young age I had communication skills and gifts. And I didn't know what that was. I just knew I liked to communicate. And grew up in the church. When I was in high school, I was very involved in the church, very vocal, very loud. But when I was in high school, I met a boy and he was like the best thing ever, or so I thought. Started a relationship with him and it turned out to be an abusive relationship. I didn't know, this is 20 years ago. Like, you don't know what, we didn't talk about these social issues, social justice issues back then. No one even talked about abuse. I don't even know if it was a term. It might have been a term in a dictionary, but not necessarily one that was widely used. But I was definitely a victim of domestic violence and started dating him when I was 15, married him a week before my 19th birthday when I was 18. And really, it was during that time in my life. Listen, my dad's a pastor this whole time. I'm definitely a part of that crowd. But I had sort of wrapped my entire worship around this guy and married him. It was a terrible decision. But it was in that marriage that I almost committed suicide one night, 3 o'clock in the morning. Because at that point I had gone through about 6 years of abuse. You know, I was being told you can't go anywhere without makeup on. You have to do what I want you to do. You can't talk to certain people. You can't go certain places. So there was a lot of control. And I was definitely feeling the pressure. I felt like I had betrayed God. I had betrayed my family and really thought that God wanted to kill me. And so one night at 3 o'clock in the morning, I offered one of the most rebellious prayers I have in my entire life. And I said, you know what? Lord, I don't believe in you. God, I don't believe in you. I don't believe a good God would allow me to go through this that I've been through for 6 years. And this is right after I was contemplating suicide, minutes after. And I said, God, if you're real, you've got to speak. You've got to speak to me now. And I looked down and my Bible was open to Psalm 91. And at the end of the chapter of Psalm 91, it says, the righteous will have long life. And only God knew that I was scared he was going to kill me. I was contemplating suicide. And that's when I really found the Lord in my soul.
Wow.
I knew the Lord in my mind, but I found the Lord and began a relationship with him that night. And got to know him for a year, didn't tell anyone about the abuse. About a year later, God said, you know what, you don't have to do this anymore. Went and told my parents, was actually kicked out of the church my dad pastored by the leadership there. And he eventually got fired because he supported me But that actually has been the foundation of something great in my life, which is ministry and um, facing facing the world that doesn't believe in God um, with courage.
Yeah.
It actually turned out to be one of the best gifts God has ever given me. So I actually wouldn't change anything about it because we've got to minister to millions of people because of it.
Love that. Actually, I relate a lot with you. I have your book here. So I have I'm Rahab here, which honestly, if you guys have not read it, look at that. You should totally read it. And I'll have one that I'll actually do in a giveaway because I think it's so powerful. I relate with you so much on that because I went through just a toxic, abusive, narcissistic, like emotionally abusive relationship, which actually took me to the feet of the Lord. That's
Yeah.
the place where I met him. And so, speaking of I'm Rahab, what is one thing that you would want to share with someone that's maybe going through an abusive relationship or dealing with suicidal thoughts, or someone that's not even sure, that they believe in God at this point? What is one thing, at least from I'm Rahab or from your story, that you would be like, this is it?
That is the
I know. When people ask me,
hardest,
I'm like, Holy Spirit, you better tell me.
worst. Oh my goodness, that's like the worst question you could ever ask. Let me just say a little background on Rahab. I studied her life for 3 years because I identified with her life, and I identified with the fact that, for those of your listeners that don't know, she was a biblical prostitute, and yet God used her to change the world, one prostitute. And I identified with that because I can't really identify with Mary, and I can't really identify with like Esther in the Bible. Like, they always did everything right, and I had made a lot of bad decisions.
I feel you.
But I guess there's so much in that book.
So much.
It's hard for me to even grasp one thing. But I think for Rahab specifically, one thing that sticks out to me, and maybe it's God that's telling me to share this right now, is that sometimes if you read in Joshua, Jericho, it says that Jericho was tightly shut because of the nation of Israel, because they had heard how great God was, and they had heard how powerful God was, and they had heard of what he had done for the nation of Israel, as in parting the Red Sea, totally delivering them from Pharaoh, feeding them for 40 years in the wilderness with food and water and manna and quail. So they had heard there was Jericho had a reputation of the Lord, but no one could get in and no one could get out because it was tightly shut. They didn't want them to come in. And one of the books I write, one of the chapters of the book I write, is no one could go in and no one could go out. So God had to place someone on the inside.
Okay.
And this chapter is called I Am God's Inside Man. And I look at my life in relation to domestic violence. God, I know, placed me in the church to out the church on issues of domestic violence in the church. And you can look up my study in 2017 that I did with Lifeway, and which started the church to hashtag, which started the movement. Sometimes when you think by any by any worldly means, or by any worldly just evaluation of who you are, you count yourself out, because you base your worth on what the world tells you are. And God doesn't base our worth on a worldly list of what qualifies us and doesn't qualify us.
Okay.
God qualified Rahab, placed her on the inside of Jericho so he could bust down and give the spies intelligence about his name. God qualified her by one thing and one thing only, and that was her faith. She's written in the Hall of Faith. I love that God kept her title, Rahab the harlot, in the Hall of Faith. So I want to tell your listeners, no matter what the world is telling you is accepted or not accepted, no matter what label they've attached to you, harlot, divorcee, like I had. I mean, there's so many different ones that people give us, and then we give ourselves. God is the one that qualifies you. And especially in the world that we're living in now, God needs people on the inside of circles, of people groups, of all sorts of things to bring his glory, to bring his deliverance to those kinds of people. And God used Rahab to do that. So there's so much I could share. I love
Girl,
that
you're
love that
preaching,
Boaz
and I'm out here like, I need to be taking notes. I'm like, that's so, so good. Like, it reminds me of the first time I saw you, and I was like, I could not write fast enough. And it's just like beautiful to see women that will stand up for issues that are happening within the church and say, hey, this isn't okay. And it's not okay to hide it. And we need to be bold about our faith. Yeah. And I absolutely love that about you. So I commend you on that. I see it on your social media platforms. I've seen it from a real platform on stage, and also from Gangster Prayer. My gosh. Do I ever get so many comments when I wear the Gangster Prayer hat? Like, people just like stop and try to read it. And so I want to tell you, that book is life-changing. I think there's a call on this generation that's in the church that we don't want to warm pews. We want to experience the living God. And so much of that is being as hardcore when it comes to prayer, to being bold, to preaching, to loving people the way that you explain in this book. And so for me, it's even like, I remember reading the Golgotha chapter, and I was like, Jesus, I gotta put some things to death. Like, let it be your will. And that's exactly when I met you, when you were preaching about that. And so I'm not going to ask you the same question because I know how hard it is.
It's so hard.
How would you exhort someone that's just getting started in prayer to follow after God? Because I know I had that issue, and I read a lot of Kenneth Hagin books and a lot of different books that helped me to break through that, but a lot of people haven't done that.
Listen, prayer is one of the things that we are taught, not necessarily by words, but by watching other people. And I learned when I actually met the Lord. I'd been in church my whole life. I met the Lord when I was 21. He did not look like what I saw in the church, guys. He felt nothing like what I had seen in that church. Now, that's not all churches. Your church is awesome. I love you guys' church. I love visiting there. Such a heart of the Father there. But I when I met the Lord, I realized in that moment, this is not who I thought God was. He met me with such grace and such forgiveness and such acceptance. And the Spirit of God was completely different than what I thought it was. And when I had that epiphany, I wondered to myself, what else have I been believing about prayer and a relationship with God that was not true? And so I literally had, we go to school to learn. I went in the school of unlearning.
So good.
I remember sitting in a prayer meeting, and I don't even know. This is like a couple of years before I had this epiphany. And there's these ladies asked me to pray. They asked me to pray because I was the pastor's daughter. I was literally not qualified to pray. I wasn't even a believer yet, like I didn't even know. It was literally my position. And they were praying. And I remember thinking to myself, this is weird, because they were like, Lord, give us this whatever, but only if it's your will. Only. We don't want anything that's not your will. And then they'd pray for something else. And it was almost like they were terrified to talk about praying something boldly. And there's a vivid memory in my mind. It's a memory in the book that I often refer back to, because I started praying about this because it was something that had almost scared me growing up in the church. What if I don't pray according to God's will? Like what is God going to zap me? Is he going to be mad at me? Is he not going to answer my prayer? And God hit me with this thought, Autumn, faith is my will. You coming before me boldly, that is in accordance to my will. So you pray whatever it is that you want. And it's up to him whether he answers it or not. Good. But there's these misconceptions about prayer, that God's mad at me. He's not listening to me. He's this, he's that, he's whatever. And you know what? I was so so sick. I'm just disgusted. I'm just going to be honest with you, Ivana. I'm just disgusted with this. I was disgusted with myself being a professional Christian.
Ooh,
I would answer every single question that you would ask me. What do you want to know about the word? I was so self-righteous and just arrogant, filled with the religious spirit. I was a professional Christian, but I had an amateur prayer life. I was like a baby. I didn't know how to approach the throne of grace. I didn't know how to cling to the word of God relentlessly, no matter what my circumstances said. I didn't know how to work through prayer. I didn't know how to have a submissive heart in prayer. And it was when I started unlearning after I found the Lord, I peeled back everything. And I said, I want to block out what I think I know. And Spirit of God, you teach me how to pray. You teach me. What does the disciples say? They looked at Jesus and they said, teach us how to pray. You know who's teaching us how to pray? Self-righteous people that think they know how to pray, but you look at their life and there's not really a lot of answers prayer there. There's a reason why Jesus put that in the Bible. Jesus, teach us how to pray. The Spirit, the Lord should be teaching us how to pray. We need to learn through his Spirit and through his word and kind of block out some of these voices when you look at their life and they're telling you how to pray. There's no fruit of answered prayer.
So good. I'm like sick and here. I'm like, I need to go pray right now. Honestly, it's like, I remember reading that book in like 3 days. And one of the things that was like really impactful to me is that your youngest daughter, she was born on my birthday. I think it's April 25th, right?
Yes, she was.
I remember reading that and I'm like crying. The story is just, so it's beautiful. If you have not read Gangster Prayer, honestly, read it. It's phenomenal. It'll give you just light a fire for prayer and intercession and believing God for big things. But speaking about your daughter and about this book, you ended up adopting 2 children, like back to back, months within each other, having small children, already being in ministry, like doing all these things. I get a lot of questions from like young Christians that want to step out into their calling and their ministry. And they're like, I have no clue how. And you did this with 4 kids. You're still doing it with 4 kids because you're a full-time mom, full-time, just like CEO of everything. What is one thing that you would say, or not one thing, because I keep putting that on you. What is something that you would say to just comfort that person and help them to pursue that calling that they have over their life?
Listen, I totally reject every narrative that says that we can't have it all. That is Satan putting limits on us who are the ambassadors for Christ. You know what? Forget that. Satan, you can just back up as far as I'm concerned. I believe that we can have it. We can have an abundant life. Not a mediocre life. Not just a regular life where we're just like whatever. We can have abundance. That is a part of the inheritance that God has set apart for us. And let me tell you something about my life. Yes, I have 4 kids. It is absolutely, totally, 100% crazy at my house. But I reject the world's narrative that God has just called me to one thing when he has told me otherwise. I have just learned, over these 20 years of doing ministry, and I've been a parent now for almost 16 years, which is nuts to me.
And you look 25, so I'm great.
I just turned 40. So that makes me feel really good. But I just have decided in my life to reject the narrative that puts shackles on what God wants to do for me. Now there is balance practically that is involved. I often talk about it. The word talks about in him, in Christ, all things hold together. So I look at my life like a wheel. Okay. So in the middle of a wheel, there's whatever that thing is called in the middle of the wheel that holds the spokes.
I have no clue, but I know what it is.
You know what I'm talking about? Okay. I look at my life like that. So the middle of the wheel is the Spirit of God. And we've got a spoke for my husband, spoke for all my kids, spoke for the ministry, spoke for speaking, writing, all this kind of stuff. It's in him that all things hold together, not in Autumn Miles. Otherwise, my life would be a train wreck. In him. And young person, and even you, Avada, as you are looking at your future, you've got to listen to him. Does your husband need Extra attention. The Spirit will tell you,
So
you need to spend some more time with her. Does Haven need extra attention? The Spirit will tell you. That's why it is so vital to be attached to the vine. Because when we are attached to the vine and we actually follow what the Spirit is telling us, you can have it all. It's when we take it on ourselves and we're the middle. And that's when everything falls apart. That's when you get overwhelmed. That's when the Spirit isn't leading you. And you know what? I want to work smarter, not harder. I want to spend less time in actually working and more time in prayer. I want the God to work for me rather than me working for God. I want him to be the one that as I give attention to the things that he tells me to, he then furthers my ministry by his own way. So I just reject. I'm just. Ugh. I know people might disagree with me. I haven't lived that way for 20 years when I found the Lord, and I'm not about to do it now. I just kind of reject those narratives and silence them.
I love that though. That is so, so powerful. It's even good for me to hear because sometimes I'm like, oh, but it's like you always have to come back to him. In him, you live and breathe and find your being. In him is your calling. In him is all these things. This has been so good. I'm like, I'm getting ministered to right now. So
I want to tell you, let me tell you this. The Spirit of God is everyone's number one resource.
Yeah.
Number one. It's not number 7. It's number 1.
Okay.
If we were to peel everything back and listen to what he tells us, I'm telling you what, we would see, I believe that we would see complete miracles even right now in the things that our nation is facing right now.
Yeah.
We must listen to his voice and shut out Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, all the things, and be zoned in on him. And that's how you'll see miracles in your life. He leads you to them.
That is so good, Autumn. Okay, so we have gone through the bigger portion of it. I just have a couple of like rapid fire questions. These are just
okay. Go.
Okay, ready? So what's something that's never missing from your purse?
Lipstick.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Definitely.
Brenda, she lives by lipstick. If she doesn't have it, she's not going out. Okay, what is your one spiritual growth focus at the moment?
Spiritual growth focus. I would say, oh gosh, there's like 50. Listen, he's still working on me. I've got so many things that I'm working on. This is supposed to be rapid. I would say controlling less. I'll say controlling less.
Same. I'm in that same season right now. Okay, what is something that you can pinpoint that says, this is what I do a day that helps me to come back to center with God?
What do I do every day that helps me to come back to center? I have time every day, no matter what, 100% of the time. I take time to be alone with the Lord every single day. So
good. Okay, last one. Define Christianity in one sentence.
Oh, my Christianity. Okay. In one sentence? Gosh.
I love this. You're like my favorite person right now. I feel like you're my best friend.
I can't do it. I would say, let's see. I don't even know. I have a lot of thoughts about the word Christianity. So I'll just say a believer. Let's put it that way. Can we put it as a believer?
I love that. Even better.
A human with unmatched potential, given they acknowledge the power of God that is at work in them. So good. Well, Autumn, this has been so much fun. Honestly, I feel like I need to go to Dallas just to have coffee with you now. You can. Come on. We'll love you here. As soon as I can. But guys, make sure that you check out Autumn Miles on all her platforms. I'm going to link everything down below. And we'll be doing a giveaway with Gangster Prayer. I am Rahab. Autumn, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. This has been such a good ministry time for me. So I know that it's going to bless so many people. You're adorable. You're beautiful. And you have great hair. And this is so fun. I love it.
Trust me, you're fabulous. Love you. I'll see you around.
Okay. Bye.